Opportunity Calls with Ellen Volpe is sponsored by LongIsland.com.
Thanks for joining me today, Hildur. I'd like to start with your last name. Perhaps you could tell us about the origin of your name.
Well, thanks for having me. My last name is Palsdottir, and it means the daughter of Paul. So my ancestors are I'm from Iceland, several generations back to the year 874.
Wow.
And I'm the daughter of Paul. So the last name is Palsdottir, means that I am the daughter of Paul, my father. And if you've read any of the Icelandic sagas, that's how they begin, by identifying the fathers.
Well, I found that fascinating when you shared that with me. And I just think that so many of us don't have that much contact with the culture of Iceland. And it's really fascinating to meet you and to learn all about it. As I mentioned, I think that you're one of the most interesting people I've met really in my 33 years of business. You have so many different facets that it's hard to begin, where to begin speaking to you. But I know that you left Iceland when you were 19. You traveled to several countries getting your education and ended up in California in Berkeley. And you were studying something called bioenergetics. Is that correct? Do I have that correct?
Yes, my work often centered in the field of cellular bioenergetics. But I was studying molecular structures, and I really enjoyed studying molecular structures in context. And therefore, in Berkeley, we were working with a high pressure freezing technique where we would apply great pressure so that the crystals wouldn't destroy the biological structures. And then we would look at molecular motors and machines in context, in the cellular context, and then study the workings of the cell, and especially what happens in cancer, deregulation, the structural differences between tissues.
How do you think that affects our world today, especially during COVID? What is the relationship to what you studied to what we're experiencing today?
Well, it touches upon something that I care about in terms of preservation and conservation. Since the time I worked in the lab in Berkeley, I have stepped out of the lab and into the world, so to speak, and I do spend considerable effort on preservation of the lands we're living on. And that's significant because I think the way we live and the extractive mentality, the way we have upset the natural balance, we're living the results of that today. You could say that the climate crisis, and I am one to believe that COVID is a result of disturbing the habitat of wild animals, that then we experienced the spillover of the virus from whether it was bats, or in the beginning it was thought to be pangolins. But the COVID crisis brought our attention to the crisis that we're in not caring enough for other animals. And I have decided to devote the rest of my life in the more than macromolecular world. I'm out and about educating. I'm an environmental educator, and I welcome the attention that we now have on the illegal trafficking of pangolins, the inhumane handling of animals as became news from the wet markets. And the way we live is simply not in balance. And therefore brings me to my passion project in terms of restorative or regenerative view, to restore or repair where we can.
Yes. So would you say that all those years ago, studying that aspect of science gave you sort of a very, very, particular view of how things are connected and what the potential is for things like this to happen.
Yes, on a both micro and macro scale, we're all connected, and we're connected to the living world that we're in. And that realization has to be met sooner than later. We're really embedded in climate change right now, and it depends on how we respond to that. That will predict the viability of our species amongst the others. We're actually in the midst of the 6th extinction, mass extinction. And it's up to us whether we'd like to join that wave or stay and care for each other. And that actually was that realization in terms of awareness of cause and effect. The way we treat the living world really directly affects our own well-being. That was what encouraged me to step out of the lab and into the world at that time. I was working at NYU Medical School at the time as a research scientist, and there was a chemical spill, formaldehyde, while at the same time I was pregnant with my firstborn.
Oh boy.
And that helped me make this decision that if not now, then when? And that we have, I'm one of the environmental educators who believe that we have about 10 years to right what's wrong. And we must act now. And at the time I became a tree sister. Tree sisters are reforesting the tropics and do that in an ethically and humane way, empowering the communities where we reforest. And in the beginning, in 2016, that movement, we had the humble goal of 1 million trees. It was a 1 million trees campaign. There was just a couple of us who donated monthly to reforestation in that effort. And we are now celebrating 15 million trees and growing.
Wow.
With over 4,000 donors monthly and 200,000 likes on Facebook, if that matters. Actually, Facebook turned into the platform that grew that organization. So I had this sense of urgency where I felt I couldn't really dedicate the next 10 years to looking at the microscope and the cellular structures anymore. I really wanted to make more difference in the world at large. And I believe my care for life was naturally ignited by carrying my son, and then being in the middle of that chemical spill sent me out of the lab because I figured I wasn't doing what was best by him.
Something else I just learned about you. That must have brought you to the organization that I don't think many people know about, the ReWild Long Island organization. And I'm wondering if you could tell us about the mission and the movement, because I'm sure most people are completely unaware that it even exists.
Yes, ReWild Long Island was really born out of discomfort. I had just moved to suburban settings, and I was really uncomfortable as a grassroots activist, uncomfortable with the chemical lawn and our practices that are not climate friendly, from gas blowers and gas-powered lawn mowers to the fertilizers and pesticides. And I'm sure you remember, I remember driving cross country and the windshield effect, where we would have just insects. You'd have to stop and actually wipe them off the screen, but that's not the case anymore. We don't have as many insects, and why that most people think, that how wonderful, not too many insects to bite me. But if we know E.O. Wilson's work, he was a naturalist who he believed the little things run the world, and I believe so too. We need the insects to turn over the soil. With ReWild Long Island, we're planting native plants. Native plants are deep-rooted and designed for the soil we're standing on. So they need no chemical assistance. After we've established a native plant garden, there's no need for fertilizer, and certainly less need for watering. and feed the local insect population where we are. And if we understand how everything is connected, then that becomes of importance. And the ReWild Long Island is a movement now. It's a legal nonprofit. I was there from the beginning, inspired by Tree Sisters, seeing how we can make a difference.
Nice.
Oh, we can actually, if we believe we can, we will. And we were created. It was a group of us who were meeting regularly at the library. It was a real, it was a cluster of like 10 to 20 people who'd meet monthly, and we then gathered around the cause. And now there's hundreds of us and growing. And ReWild Long Island hosts native plant sales. And this can only benefit the ground we're standing on. What most people don't know is that every year we're losing billion tons of topsoil per person on Earth. And that's erosion. And if we don't bind the soil, we're basically going to lose the land we're standing on. With ReWild Long Island, it's one of the few things humans can do when you are actually helping and leaving the ground in better shape than when you found it. Because many of the ways we live are extractive, are taking away and causing damage. But when we plant the native plant, they are deep-rooted compared to the non-natives. They need less watering. There is no need for chemical assistance. So we're binding the soil and, most importantly, feeding the insect population. And that in turn will feed the bird population. And we're part of a healthy cycle of life. What became clear just recently is we've lost 3 billion birds in the last 50 years.
Wow.
There was a count that we've lost 1 out of 4 birds since the 1970s, when Rachel Carson wrote Silent Spring. These are chilling facts, and we're in the midst of this biodiversity crisis. And if the connection isn't made sooner, we will pay a devastating price. There is the climate crisis is basically the result of 1 million bad choices. And it's symptomatic of that cause and effect that then leaves us with a situation that's out of control. But the good news is we can make a difference. So there's a new movement, a regenerative movement. It's beyond sustainability, regeneration, to restore, to replenish, is to rejuvenate. And I follow that movement. There's a wonderful documentary actually on Netflix now called Kiss the Ground that follows this concept that I would like to recommend to the viewers. But with regeneration, we're going beyond sustainability because we can't sustain a sick culture. We must do better than that now.
Thanks, Hildur. That was amazing information. I'm sure that will be interesting to everybody. I'm Ellen Volpe, and we'll be right back after this short break.
Opportunity Calls with Ellen Volpe is sponsored by LongIsland.com. American Business Associates is New York Metro's premier business development and networking association. To learn more about ABA, visit aba-ny.com.